Hello, everybody. This is the second session of our Secure Your Systems with our ecosystem series, and I'd like to give you a warm welcome. It's great to have you here in this special week on this special day. And you know, today we are celebrating 58 years of the IBM Z mainframe. So, 2 days ago we had the introduction of our newest system, and today we will celebrate together with Adam Keeling. Adam, great to have you here. You're coming from Beta Systems, and we are going to talk about several security risks, the top 5 to be exact, today. And I really look forward for the upcoming hour and our session together. And thanks for joining, Adam.
Thank you.
Maybe you want to introduce yourself for a short introduction.
Sure. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much. And welcome to all. Again, as Patrick had said, a special thank you to joining us today. And it's an exciting week. And I'm really excited to be able to share some solutions that we see at Beta Systems and that I personally have an interest in, of course, to some of the top enterprise software security risks that we all face today, especially on our mainframe. But of course, first, I think it's important that I go ahead and introduce myself, because I'm sure that there are some folks wondering, well, who am I and why should I even bother listening to this guy? So first, great questions, and hopefully I'll be able to put your minds at ease. So my name is Adam Keeling. I'm a pre-sales engineer for Beta Systems. I'm located in the United States, but of course we're headquartered in Berlin, Germany. But my primary focus has been on our custom mainframe security solutions that we offer at Beta Systems. Plus, I've spent quite a few years across quite a few projects, really spanning a wide range of enterprise platforms beyond just the mainframe. And I have a pretty well-rounded background in software security as a whole. But as a company, of course, we do offer much more than just mainframe security. Our solutions span across network management, workload automation, output and log management, and archival and data quality assurance, just to name a few. But today, as we had mentioned, I'm going to be focusing on the top 5 security risks that we see for networks, mainframes, and really across our enterprise systems in general.
Great. So Adam, thank you again to have you. Just a few words before we get into the deep details. Just for those who are not knowing me, just saying I'm the Z-Stack platform lead in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland within IBM. So I'll be your host for the upcoming detailed sessions. For those who've seen the first session of the season with Christian Dase, we will do the deep dives with me. So if you do not like my haircut, please give us a shout and we will try to replace me. But otherwise, we will get into the deep dives now. And Adam, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, so I think it's important actually to start by recognizing, and I certainly recognize this, that when we have a presentation and we're talking about the top 5 of anything, especially top 5 security risks, many of us form our own opinions, or sometimes even by the end of it, we can be left thinking, maybe I understand these problems, but what do I actually do about it? So today, in the spirit of really taking action, we're not going to just be discussing these risks maybe at a high level. We're actually going to try and address some tangible ways that we can mitigate these risks that I'll be discussing, really with the goal of helping you learn how to see some positive results when it comes to improving things like the following. So these really are those top 5 around network device security, around best practices for password management and authentication. Even though password management sometimes feels like it should be a problem of the past, it's definitely something that we need to be thinking about today and in the future. We'll discuss some of the real challenges along with solutions that go into securing a remote workforce, and being aware of threats from, say, public Wi-Fi and what we can do about it. And then finally, some procedures for just generally reducing system vulnerabilities, especially on our mainframe, that can be presented by social engineering tactics and really that ever-present issue of employees that continue to use social media. And it's at this point that I often get questions, even if it's sometimes just within our own minds or out loud, where some of these topics seem very broad in scope, but they actually are really tied together. And what ties them together is that they can feel overwhelming. It can be endless. And before we know it, we start making decisions and trying to address these problems one at a time or without that clear vision and a forward-thinking plan. So a common symptom of that can be seen when you look into your systems and you see types of tools and products at your organization, and you find that your teams are using a bunch of different vendor solutions. Sometimes you're recognizing, hey, there's some overlap here and we've got some unnecessary tools. Or do we find that our organization is using our homegrown solutions? They're often legacy, they've been built in-house, and there's a lot that hasn't really been documented, and people ask questions and everybody just says, hey, go ask Steve in the IT department. He's really the only one who knows. But the bottom line is that these situations, among many others, are common, and they are symptoms of decisions that were made long ago without that clear vision. So our goal is to break that cycle and stay open-minded and recognize solutions to a broad range of concerns like these that I'm talking about. And then we can actually some of the solutions can actually come from just a few well-designed tools, and that can help your efforts. So really those three goals here that we have today is to be aware of those most critical risks to your organization's system and data, that we want you to quickly find out where you are most vulnerable, especially on your mainframe. And most importantly, we want to address them proactively before they become a problem. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to start with that very first step, and that first place is at ground zero. It's a critical component before we even get to our mainframe, which is our network. And specifically, we want to address some best practices around securing all devices, especially in a world where so many of us are accessing corporate systems and our Z system from remote locations via TSO and things like that. So I'm sure that we all know that it's imperative that every attempt to gain our access to our network should be fully vetted. But while we often focus on potential threats from the outside, thinking, okay, well, maybe somebody could try to hack into our network, but good luck getting past all of our defense layers, it's really not good enough, because we can't just focus on who is attempting to access our network from the outside. We actually have to approach it from a place of perimeterless security. That's also another way of thinking of zero trust, where we're continually assessing the health and security of our internal network. And another way to kind of think about that is we're assuming perhaps there's somebody that's already inside of our network and maybe they shouldn't have that access, or maybe there are people inside of our access that have too much in terms of privileges or too much access to certain resources that they should not. Because when we ask key questions like, is this device that the person is using really secure, it really expands to other important questions that we have to be able to answer first. Like, well, do we have a solution that enables us to actually see every connected device in real time? And then once we see every device, are we sure that it's fully authorized? So in other words, do we know if that device is flagged or it's prohibited based on previous activity? So now that we kind of understand a couple of those key pain points, we need to address these with that clear mind, that clear approach to really achieve our desired results, which means that we have to start first by identifying and discovering and knowing that we can do this every single network device and endpoint that is connected to the network. So that means we can't just identify one brand or one type. We actually have to have that full real-time inventory of everything from every switch, every router, SCADA equipment, desktop, PC, Internet of Things, right? You name it. Plus, we need that comprehensive profile of every device that is automatically available to our network administrators and our security team, which means that they can use a special protocol that we can talk about later. And as an example of what we mean by discovering and mapping all devices across our network, let's say if we have multiple hardware vendors from Dell or Cisco or HP or any others, we need to be able to discover all of those, but something that goes a step beyond that is being able to have that full library that enables you to have an interactive real-time view from a remote location. You don't have to be physically on site to really see what's happening with every connection to every device, the status of everything, and be able to drill down and navigate to those. And then at times you might want to, check something specific, say on a Cisco device, and then a Dell server, and then you're talking about Z operating system, the mainframe, right? You don't really want to be switching between applications to be able to view all of this, because when it really comes to implementing network security, every connection in our network must be completely visible through that single pane of glass, that full dashboard. Now let's take a look at an example of, say, a security breach or an example of this, which if somebody were trying to gain access by maybe spoofing a device MAC address, meaning that they're just trying to make an unauthorized device look like a valid one, we need to be able to identify that occurred and block it and prevent access to that port. Plus, we want various options that are available to navigate through that authentication process so that we can see, hey, what was happening with this device? What was happening around the time that it was attempting to connect? We may even want to check the port speed or verify, hey, which ports have other endpoints that are connected. And another issue that we face today is that with more workers performing their duties basically remotely, it means that there's less time in the office. And very often that means more corporate devices and applications will be exposed across public networks. And I know many of us are working at home full-time now on, say, a private local network, but oftentimes people across the world they're still traveling some, and they're still going to their local coffee shop, at least for a few hours. If for no other reason than we need a change of scenery, or we need to take a break from the kids, or whatever that case may be. And so the questions that we have to ask ourselves is our internal network really able to detect potential threats immediately, especially from those external networks? And do we have comprehensive monitoring in place? And can we identify very quickly things like suspicious activity? And that leads us to that important capability of device and endpoint monitoring. So to do that, it's really critical to have that accurate real-time information that's displayed in simple dashboard views for network administrators to stay on top of everything. Plus, any suspicious activity needs to be ranked in terms of the risk level, so minor, major, or critical. And then the alerts for those events have to be displayed automatically and communicated across your entire security team, including the mainframe guys. And from there, it's really imperative that the solution offers that quick troubleshooting and analysis capability, right? Because we need to be able to drill down into that endpoint and take the action that we need to shore up security for it. So for example, that could include, just as one example, being able to pull up that topology map, being able to see what's going on across the entire network, drill down into that switch, and then have those indicators for those alerts. And something else before we finish up with this section is it's often overlooked and very important that we assess our network in general with that clear-minded approach where we're able to poke holes in it, not have somebody else poke holes in it. So we have that preventative mindset, which means that we're assuming, hey, perhaps there's something that's happening inside of our network, not just something that's trying to hack into it from the outside. So we're still assuming that there could already be somebody in there. And this means that we have to constantly analyze our traffic and communication patterns inside of the network so that we can immediately flag problematic devices and in other cases be able to grant access if desired. So that's really just in summary from a network perspective. Take a moment and just reflect on some of the questions that we did ask regarding how secure is our network? How secure is your network, both today and in the future, especially if we intend to make sure that it's fortified and that before you ever get to the mainframe, everything is fortified. So what we've seen thus far is that with the right solution, we have the ability to have complete visibility of every connected device and endpoint, regardless of your vendor or your brand type. We can verify every device is secure and valid, and we can monitor and identify and automatically block devices that should not have access. We can detect and alert on suspicious activities inside of our network. And we have a whole host of other capabilities right at our fingertips. And if we have implemented these essential capabilities, it means that we have that solid security foundation that's already in place before any device or any user accesses our Z-System mainframe. So with that, Patrick, I'll just ask you, do you have any questions before we really jump into what I consider the most fun part and the meatiest part that's really getting into the mainframe side of this? I wanted to make sure that we address that first part from that initial network layer.
Yeah, very well done. So no detailed question, to be honest. The only one is not really so deep, but where's the mainframe in the picture? But
exactly.
As you said, yeah, we're getting there. We're approaching the mainframe, and
absolutely
looking forward.
Yes. So, and I know that it's sometimes it can feel like, hey, why are we talking about the network when we're getting to the mainframe? But the key is we're talking about those top 5 risks. And for me, and especially at our company, what we've noticed is sometimes we can expose our mainframe along with other systems when we don't take care of that first one. So I'll go ahead and start shifting in my focus into that. So making that shift now, what we'll do is we'll kind of look at the potential threats that are coming from inside of our once you're inside the network, really looking at our enterprise systems, and that brings us to the mainframe. So we're going to cover things like best practices for overall security management. Plus, we're going to make sure that all users have limited access to sensitive data inside the mainframe, especially when so many of us are working remotely full time.
Yeah, great. So as you said, yeah, it's not only the one system, the one device, which could be, on risk, but it's the overall network, and it's important to have the overview. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
My key takeaway. Yeah.
So absolutely. Great. And I thought just having that, being one of the first presentations in the ecosystem series, that I thought it would make sense to address some of that before we hear about everyone else's spot.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. So as I get started here, though, I sometimes, and we've kind of been addressing that, I can understand that some of you may be even saying, wait, I kind of have a handle on what we just covered. I understand that, hey, there's some network security pieces that we have to make sure are in place first. But then we have things like password issues, which I feel like should be a problem of the past, especially with better authentication practices for the most part being practiced and being implemented across many organizations. But there still are some issues there that we need to address. Also, I suppose maybe you could be thinking social media, maybe that's a concern, but our staff would never do anything to cause an issue publicly, at least not on purpose. And social engineering, I'm still not quite sure that I understand that fully, but maybe that could be a problem. And besides, my mainframe, it's a fortress. So why should I even bother with any of these concerns to start with? So very quickly, I'll run through just a couple silly sort of examples, but it actually is pretty serious, because even though none of us would fall for some silly Facebook scam or post like this, I'm sure that we know someone or have seen others who do. And this is just kind of like a very simple example. And it's like, oh, that's really easy. And that should never happen, especially with professionals, right? But then there's the idea that there are people and they have exposed themselves through ID badges and their history, releasing all kinds of personally identifiable information, even on Twitter. Thankfully, these situations were taken down and they're no longer a problem. But again, it still happens. And you think, wow, there's the human emotion, there's the human factor to this. And then just recently, within the last month, I even felt some conviction about this, about LinkedIn, because I know this one should be that trusting and a professional platform that we expect that from LinkedIn. But that trust can actually be exploited by just a few bad players who simply want to, say, impersonate somebody. And it's really up to us to just be mindful about what we're posting about our professional lives, our whereabouts, and staying vigilant about protecting ourselves and our identities on our own behalf. And I'm sharing this one particularly because it just shows that it's recent. It's not something that's in the past or sometime well into the future. It's here and now. And then we have social media in the corporate world. And I know, you thought I was just going to hit some of the easy stuff, but really we can't escape it. There's internal communication from Slack and Mattermost and Teams, Microsoft Teams. But again, there's that element of zero trust, that zero trust architecture that's coming into play. And this absolutely all affects the mainframe, because I know that we can be thinking these are just fear tactics and it's 2022 and account protection and mitigating these vulnerabilities should not be something that I'm concerned with. But at the end of the day, we cannot quantify the damage in dollar terms when something like a security breach happens. We've seen this in the news and publicity and poor PR campaigns that come of it. Service level agreements are broken. And this leads us into the bottom line, which is that there are threats out there from social engineering tactics that actually expose our mainframe. Even when we're putting our trust in RACF, which is an awesome security platform, we still have to make sure that we're doing our part to mitigate those risks. So I know that we're all at least listening now and kind of saying, okay, well, maybe there's a point here, but what do I do about it, right? And that's what we're going to address. We're going to tackle these specific ways that we can shore up our security on the mainframe and that we can implement best practices in RACF to eliminate vulnerabilities in general and to really just protect ourselves from social engineering tactics out there that could be an exploited, that they could exploit us from, but we'll make sure that they can't do that. So that starts first by recognizing that the mainframe, it's not a silo. It's not in that big room like it used to be, where it was just a huge machine that took up that entire room and lived in one space and disconnected from everything. Really, today, the mainframe is very connected, right? It's open to many other systems and devices and application sources, and all of it's critical. All of that is critical business data. And in some cases, as we've noted, there are places where it can put us at risk. And today, unfortunately, there just aren't near as many people that are as experienced RACF administrators as there were even 5 or 10 years ago. And that know the syntax that's posted on the screen for you right now, or that they know how to configure that properly, among many other challenges. So even though RACF really is a great platform, it is designed to be that fortress and our best protector of the mainframe and of our data on the mainframe, we have to do our part to maintain and protect our data as well using RACF the right way. So to do that means that we have to ask ourselves, are we using best practices when configuring password rules and management? Are we overlooking other risks? Are we sure that all mainframe resources are properly protected? Many organizations genuinely struggle to answer yes, that they know for sure after so many mergers and acquisitions and changes that happen across this platform, things change. So let's start with that initial question, because it's that critical first step. Are we using best practices for RACF and mainframe security? And if we are not, what do we do about it? So with that in mind, when we're implementing best practices, it requires that we notice that, okay, with native RACF, it can be complex, it can present some challenges. So if we have the right tools in place to quickly see, hey, who has access to these different resources? Is our system configured to close off those vulnerabilities? Do we have easy ways to just run reports and identify and simplify RACF administration? So with that, a good place to start is by making mainframe security management easier with maybe a web interface to perform some of those RACF functions, but you're alleviating the burden on, say, maybe senior level RACF administrators, and you're able to hand some of those tasks off and delegate those tasks to other users so that they can edit some basic RACF data. Also, when it comes to reporting, it's really important to have a solution that cuts the effort and time it takes to identify potential issues and reducing stress. while giving you best practice recommendations to keep things secure. So our reports do enable you to validate that your system can meet some of those compliance checks that we've talked about, even in the roundtable session, if you were part of that. But perhaps even more so, it just provides peace of mind. Hey, I've got these reports that are checking all of those specific vulnerabilities, like do unauthorized users have access to sensitive data like payment transactions? Or in the case of password requirements, perhaps they're not strong enough and you want to make sure that you're reducing that mandatory password change interval to things like 60 days, where you're increasing requirements for that, or even implementing multi-factor authentication, which is really important for places like shared passwords, which a lot of developers and DBAs and people like that do have for like administrative accounts. So it's really helpful when they implement extra protection on those specific accounts as well. And just as, even though it feels rudimentary, thus far, I know, you can't really be too careful, as we've seen, when it comes to protecting our data. So some best practices and reminders for configuring passwords in RACF, and not just your special or privileged users, right? For all users, it's really important to require complex passwords, perhaps even implement passphrases, make sure that they expire, and keep the password history for up to 10 previous generations, which will help reduce that reuse of those passwords. And finally, if your organization just has the ability to implement that multi-factor authentication, it's definitely an added bonus. As I had mentioned, with certain types of administration accounts and special accounts, it's really important that we do that. And if you're not quite sure how to keep up with all of these, really that's something that everyone from IBM to the folks here at Beta Systems and many others who can actually help you. We have specific reports that gather that information so that you can quickly assess, hey, are we really implementing those checks and balances that we need, or do we have some edits and updates to make? So to move beyond that for just a moment, to really effectively secure RACF and secure the mainframe, you need to know what's actually happening in the moment and be alerted of potential security events. And that's why we have the ability to automatically monitor all of those events that are happening in RACF. And we're triggering automated alerts that let you know, hey, there is a problem here. There's a potential issue. So it's monitoring it on your behalf so that you don't have to manually do anything. But again, any monitoring type of system is really only as good as the data that's in there and the information that it's able to provide. So in this case, it's important that we're providing that in a timely manner, in real time, instantly, so that we know when something happens and how to respond to it. And that's something that our solution does. It takes care of all of those things for you, for filtering, for figuring out which messages matter the most, any errors or warning signs that you need to define or check on, and it notifies your teams when there's a problem. Now that we've seen at least some of the examples of implementing some of I'd say the higher level simple best practice security measures that we need to take, there is really that additional step, and that is that we have to address that question: are we sure that all of our resources on the mainframe are fully protected? Because we're talking about RACF, which means Resource Access Control Facility, right? So are those resources that we're protecting, are we sure that there aren't any users that have access to it that really shouldn't? That's what we need to close off. So to do that means that it's critical to simplify the process of knowing this. Who has access to that important information and how are they getting it? Because believe it or not, sometimes that's actually difficult. And there's a lot of organizations we've met with, especially if they're using native RACF and they don't have that experienced administrator, it can make that process really quite difficult. So to do that, it means that we need a tool that can provide that shortcut to get the information we need when we need it. So in this case, we could use a solution that quickly can view a user, assess the permissions that it has, and just as importantly, see who is authorizing that access, all within just 1 or 2 clicks. So when it comes to assigning permissions, say in RACF, that's where it's really best to use groups as specific user roles, because once you define these properly, you've got your senior administrators who can delegate the task of reviewing and connecting users to those right groups, which really makes sure that if the groups and roles are defined appropriately, those users are only going to have the access that they need. Especially using a web interface makes this really easy to learn and to be trained on. Plus, it offers different capabilities from being able to just simply make changes to user passwords or revoke or resume access. Gives a lot of granular control for those administrators, for those security personnel to perform a lot of the work that we need to perform to make sure that our systems are in fact as secure as possible. And then we can start with some permissions analysis. So another thing that we can do with analyzing permissions is that we can narrow our search to a small selection of users. We want to make sure that we use simple commands that do a lot of the hard work behind the scenes to determine, hey, what do they have access to? How are they getting it? And then the best part is that we have the flexibility to really make those changes that we need to on the fly. So we've seen from a web interface to a Windows interface to the old mainframe interface, how we can do a lot of the same types of tasks here. And those are all really important. But I also know, we want to be able to perform analysis without just using that old mainframe interface. And we can even use something that we have that's a Windows-based tool, which really helps make it especially user-friendly to run simple commands, to do a lot of the same types of tasks that we've seen before, but do that in, say, a Windows interface where we can have it read-only, especially, so nobody can just pull data out of here and export it and do things like that if they do not have access to do so. But that's also something that's very important to protect our RACF data itself. And one final kind of advanced thing that we can do for anyone who is more familiar with RACF is recognizing that, hey, we can actually start digging much deeper into some things that are really complex within the Z system when it comes to how access is granted through the Unix priv class of RACF, or even the surrogate class. So those two things basically allow elevated or super user privileges to user IDs without perhaps even needing a password to log in with another. And this is really helpful for developers and database administrators and folks that are kind of on the administrative side. But that area specifically creates a bit of a problem if you have an audit and you recognize, hey, we have some vulnerabilities here because we've got these users that have this level of access, and it's giving them so much more access than they need to, they don't even, some of them might not know that they have the keys to the kingdom effectively to be able to have access to many other resources that are sensitive, that have payment transactions, that have PII data, that have a lot of data that could be very confidential. And we need to make sure that we're protecting that. So that's really what we allow to do, and we make that process really easy, even for folks that may be newer to RACF or newer security administrators that need some support there, or auditors as well. And one more note is that in general, when we're talking about security across not just RACF but in the mainframe, but our entire enterprise, is that it's important that we have best practices for provisioning through role-based access, as we mentioned. But we can do this beyond just the mainframe, where we can have an identity and access management solution. So a full solution that really covers the mainframe and beyond, and it kind of ties into all of your different identity sources, but it creates that master identity source, and it provides that full level of identity management across all systems. And it has, of course, additional capabilities as well. And it's really because of the challenges that we've discussed so far today that many organizations really have been choosing to and need to adopt more secure policies. And that's something that at Beta Systems we're trying to help by creating that complete solution that addresses these types of problems that we've been discussing, that addresses the risks that we've discussed around RACF administration, and being able to just make sure, hey, is our mainframe, is our network secure? Are all of these things secure? Because we believe that mainframe security is just too important to be difficult. So that's why we want to provide those tools that enable organizations to be able to move beyond, say, maybe just native RACF or another solution that might not be working as well for them, to improve security management across your systems, which effectively allows us to answer those questions, to check those boxes, to be able to say, yes, we fully implemented best practices across our mainframe, and we have fully protected our most sensitive resources. So perhaps now's a good time to recognize, maybe there's some sighs of relief that it's over in terms of like the meat of that. But hopefully it's because you understand that there really are some real security challenges that are faced by many organizations today. And most importantly, that we have learned that there are some key things that we can do to address key security concerns across our network, across our mainframe, and really much further and beyond. So with that, Patrick, I will ask, do you have any questions about anything specifically that I talked about, or it is the audience?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and the first question, or the best thing I would take for me personally is the aspect about passwords, right? So, as mentioned, we announced a new system this week, with the IBM Z16, with the highest standards for security, quantum safe security, and as you mentioned, beginning with RACF. We have key management, things like that, crypto cards and quantum safe security in the system. But the system is just as secure as you allow it to be. Yeah. So if
Absolutely.
You have a password, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or even worse, if you have a strong password and you promote it on any social media or tell it on the phone to somebody else, there's an issue, and we live in a connected world. There's more than just one device, and we're going hybrid. We're going to hybrid systems, hybrid infrastructure, several devices, several operating systems connecting to our mainframe. Connected and working with data on our mainframe. So in the end, if you don't secure the password and don't secure the system, then you have an issue. So the aspect on multi-factor authentication you brought in, is a really important thing, And beside that, as you mentioned, knowing what is happening in the network and on the system is essential as well. And maybe you can provide your view from the 5 risks you mentioned, social engineering, social media, the password aspect, as well as device security, and even now, within the overall situation, we are all in with remote working and public networks and things like that. What is your personal view on that? What's the important thing for you, if you can name one?
Yes, that's the hardest part, right? Naming one. Just pick one. I mean, it's difficult, but if I have to pick one, I think it's really the human element side of it. Mm-hmm. So maybe it bridges into 2 or 3 with passwords and social engineering and social media, but I feel like social media specifically, because when we think social media, I think it can be just, you can assume the simple things like a Facebook or Twitter or like the big ones out there, but it's really broad. Social media, it effectively encompasses anything that's like a community, any groups, anything that you can comment on, any places where you realize you're actually part of a bigger group and you're sharing things beyond just yourself and with many people in a form that you might not know. And I think that's the part that is so difficult, because once it gets to that level, if we think about the mainframe, if we think about the systems in general that we use, software especially, it's built on really one key aspect, which is control, right? So code is effectively a control system to say, we have a process, we have a system, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we can handle specific errors. But when you add the human element, the human factor into that, we tend to be able to exploit, even if we're not trying to, we can break that system. We can figure out a way somehow to get beyond that. And I think that's the part that is most difficult, because it's not that we need to control social media or humans in general. It's more of recognizing our systems lose an element of control because of this information sharing capability that we all have. So to me, that's, even though 99.9% of us never intend any harm, I think that's the hardest part that we can't control. We have to just recognize it. And that's why we take those specific measures and implement those practices that we saw today, and things that we'll see throughout this series. We have to implement them, because that's what's going to help us prevent those issues from coming up.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So this is, if I get it right, this is the most concerning part when you think about security and something affecting these systems, the human aspect in the whole system, right?
Absolutely.
Is this the one?
It's really, because it's the one that we have the least control over, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, with systems, that's what we build our systems to kind of be that perfect framework that forces you to, you're filling out this form, you're doing this, you have these transactions, and we have these outputs of reports and things like that. But even with our Z system, some level at a human level, we can figure out a way to mess that up sometimes. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, great. So thank you very much. So if there's no question from out there, I'd like to make a short wrap up. So as we did right now, we had the first session out of 6, the first deep dive session. Thank you very much, Adam Keeling from Beta Systems. So we talked about the top 5 security risks, and the one most concerning one affecting the system. And we will go over to the next session on the 21st of April, talking with software engineering about audit handling in finance and insurance, followed by the third session with software AG exploring database security on IBM C. And we'll go to May and June with very interesting parts from PEP Security and other ecosystem partners. So stay tuned, and I really look forward to meet you in the next sessions. And once again, Adam, thank you very, very much for the time, and it was great. So maybe sometime we will have joint sessions with the customers on site, and I really look forward to work with you in the ecosystem.
That would be great. Thanks a lot, Patrick. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.